I sit here in my luxury penthouse office, staring at an elegant wedding invitation addressed to Mr. Cole Thompson. My hands shake as I read my daughter Emma's name printed in beautiful script. 15 years ago, my wife Sarah and 12-year-old Emma gave me the silent treatment for an entire month after I missed Emma's school play for a work emergency. The coldness in our house became unbearable, driving me to leave everything behind and disappear from their lives. Now, Emma wants me at her wedding. She has no idea that her family thinks I've been a struggling failure all these years, when the truth is exactly the opposite. Back then, I was Cole Thompson, a 28-year-old struggling insurance adjuster in the small town of Cedar Falls, Iowa. Every morning, I'd drive my rusted Honda Civic to the cramped office downtown, handling claims for farmers whose crops failed or homeowners whose basements flooded. Sarah worked part-time at the Cedar Falls Public Library, checking out books and organizing community reading programs. We lived paycheck to paycheck in a modest 2-bedroom house on Maple Street, where the paint was peeling and the furnace made strange noises all winter long. For months, I had been working overtime, staying late at the office, taking weekend calls, all because I desperately wanted the promotion to regional supervisor. The extra money would change everything for our family. We could finally afford to fix the leaky roof, maybe even take Emma on that vacation to Disney World she'd been begging for since she turned 10. The incident that destroyed my family happened on a Thursday evening in April. Emma was starring as Dorothy in her middle school's production of The Wizard of Oz. She had been practicing her lines for WAGs, singing "Somewhere Over the Rainbow" in the shower every morning. I had promised her I would be sitting in the front row, cheering louder than any other parent in that auditorium. But at 4 in the afternoon, my boss Harold Jenkins called me into his office. A factory fire 3 hours away needed immediate investigation for potential insurance fraud. The claim was worth $2 million, and Harold suspected the owner had deliberately started the blaze to collect money. He needed someone there immediately to interview witnesses and document evidence before the scene was compromised. "I can't go tonight, Harold," I told him, standing in front of his cluttered desk. "My daughter's school play starts at 7. I promised her I'd be there." Harold leaned back in his creaky leather chair, his gray mustache twitching with irritation. "Thompson, this is exactly the kind of dedication I'm looking for in my regional supervisor. Show me you can prioritize the big picture, and that promotion we've been discussing becomes a reality." The choice felt impossible. Disappoint Emma tonight or watch the promotion slip away and continue struggling financially for years. I convinced myself I could handle both. The drive was 3 hours each way, but if I rushed through the investigation, I might make it back by the second act. Emma would understand. She was mature for her age. I was wrong about everything. The investigation took longer than expected. The factory owner was evasive, the witnesses were scattered across town, and the evidence collection was more complex than Harold had anticipated. By the time I finished interviewing the last witness, it was already 8:30. Then construction on Interstate 80 caused a massive traffic jam that didn't clear until after 10 o'clock. I arrived at Lincoln Middle School at 10:15 that night. The parking lot was empty except for a few scattered cars. The custodian was locking up the building as I pulled into the spot where I should have parked 3 hours earlier. The auditorium was dark and silent. Emma's big moment had come and gone without me there to witness it. When I walked through our front door, the house felt different. Sarah was sitting at the kitchen table, still wearing the blue dress she had picked out specially for the occasion. Her makeup was smudged from crying, and she looked up at me with an expression I had never seen before. It wasn't anger exactly, but something colder and more final. "How was the investigation?" she asked quietly. "Sarah, I'm so sorry. The traffic was horrible and the case took longer than expected. Is Emma awake? I need to apologize to her." "She cried herself to sleep 2 hours ago," Sarah said, standing up from the table. "She kept looking at the empty seat where you were supposed to be sitting. When the play ended, she was the only Dorothy whose father wasn't there to give her flowers." I tried to explain about the promotion, about how this sacrifice would benefit our entire family in the long run. Sarah listened without interrupting, her face growing more distant with every word I spoke. When I finished, she simply said, "I'm going to bed," and walked upstairs. That was the last real conversation we had for 32 days. The next morning, Emma came down for breakfast and looked right through me as if I didn't exist. When I asked her about the play, she didn't respond. When I complimented her new hairstyle, she acted like no one had spoken. Sarah adopted the same behavior. They would answer my questions with nods or headshakes when absolutely necessary, but they treated me like a ghost haunting our own home. I tried everything to break through their wall of silence. I bought Sarah her favorite roses from the florist downtown. She accepted them politely, but never said thank you. I purchased tickets to the traveling circus coming to Des Moines, thinking Emma would be excited about a family adventure. She glanced at the tickets and walked away. I attempted to cook dinner for the family, but they ate quickly and left me sitting alone at the table. The house became a place where conversations happened around me but never included me. Sarah would call her sister Linda on the phone and discuss their day while I sat in the living room close enough to hear but excluded from participating. Emma would invite her friends over and they would giggle and chat in her bedroom while I listened from the hallway, remembering when she used to share her secrets with me. Sarah started staying late at the library, claiming they needed extra help with inventory. Emma began spending afternoons and weekends at her friend Jessica's house, coming home only for dinner and homework. I felt invisible in my own family, watching my wife and daughter build a life that didn't include me. After 3 weeks of this treatment, I was desperate enough to try anything. I wrote long letters apologizing for missing the play, explaining my hopes for the promotion, promising to never prioritize work over family again. I left the letters on Emma's pillow and Sarah's nightstand, but neither of them ever acknowledged reading them. I suggested family counseling, but Sarah just shrugged and walked away. I proposed a weekend trip to Chicago, thinking a change of scenery might help us reconnect. Emma acted like she hadn't heard me. I even considered quitting my job entirely just to prove how much our family meant to me, but we needed my income to pay the mortgage. The breaking point came during the 4th week of their silence. I had been looking for aspirin in Sarah's purse because my head was pounding from stress, and I found a business card for Margaret Walsh, attorney at law, specializing in family and divorce proceedings. Written on the back in Sarah's handwriting was an appointment date and time scheduled for the following Tuesday. My hands trembled as I stared at that card. Sarah hadn't just been giving me the silent treatment as punishment for missing Emma's play. She had been planning our divorce meeting with lawyers preparing to end our marriage. The cold shoulder wasn't meant to teach me a lesson. It was meant to push me away until leaving felt like my own decision. That night I confronted Sarah in our bedroom. "I found the attorney's card," I said, holding it between us like evidence in a trial. She looked at me for the first time in weeks, her green eyes filled with something that might have been relief. "I was wondering when you'd find that." "Sarah, we can work this out. I know I made a mistake, but people miss important events sometimes. It doesn't mean our marriage has to end." "It's not about the play, Cole," she said, sitting on the edge of our bed. "It's about the fact that you chose work over Emma without hesitation. It's about how you always choose something else over us. The play was just the last straw." "That's not fair," I protested. "Everything I do is for this family. I work overtime so we can have a better life." "But we're not having a better life," Sarah replied. "We're having a life where Emma's father doesn't show up for the most important moments. We're having a life where I feel like a single mother most of the time. Maybe we'd be happier if that was actually true." Our argument woke Emma, who appeared in our doorway wearing her purple pajamas, tears streaming down her face. "Stop fighting," she cried. "I hate this house. I hate that you're always working. I wish things could go back to how they used to be." But as she said those words, her eyes were focused on me with an expression that chilled my blood. It wasn't sadness or disappointment. It was exhaustion. My 12-year-old daughter was tired of dealing with me, tired of hoping I would change, tired of being let down. She looked at me like I was a problem she wanted to disappear. "I wish you would just go away," Emma whispered before running back to her room and slamming the door. Those words hit me harder than anything Sarah could have said. My own daughter wanted me gone from her life. I wasn't a father she could count on. I was a source of stress and disappointment that she wanted to eliminate. That night, I sat alone in my car in our driveway, trying to figure out how everything had gone so wrong. My neighbor Jim Patterson came outside to check his mail and saw me sitting there in the dark. Jim was a decent guy who worked at the John Deere plant and always kept his lawn perfectly manicured. "Rough night?" he asked, walking over to my car window. "You could say that," I replied, not wanting to share details of our family problems. Jim looked uncomfortable for a moment, then said, "Look, Cole, I probably shouldn't tell you this, but Sarah's been talking to the neighbors about your situation. She's been pretty open about how unhappy she is with your priorities. Most of us figured you guys were headed for trouble." The humiliation was complete. Not only had I failed as a husband and father, but the entire neighborhood knew about our problems. Sarah had been discussing our private struggles with virtual strangers while refusing to speak to me at all. "What did she tell you?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to hear the answer. "She said you never make time for Emma's activities, that you promise things and then break those promises for work. She said she feels like she's raising Emma alone." Jim paused, looking genuinely sympathetic. "She also said she doesn't think you're ever going to change." I thanked Jim for his honesty and watched him walk back to his house. Sitting there in the darkness, I realized that my presence in Sarah and Emma's lives had become more harmful than helpful. I was a constant reminder of disappointment and broken promises. Every time they looked at me, they saw someone who had let them down. Maybe the kindest thing I could do was give them the space they clearly wanted. Maybe I needed to leave and prove that I could become the man they needed, rather than staying and continuing to fail them as the man I was. If I couldn't win back their respect as their current husband and father, perhaps I could earn it by transforming into someone worthy of their love. The decision crystallized in that moment. I would leave Cedar Falls, remake myself completely, and return only when I had become successful enough to prove that their faith in me wouldn't be misplaced again. I would show them that Cole Thompson could be the man they deserved, even if it meant spending years away from them to make that transformation possible. The next morning, I made the hardest decision of my life. I couldn't stay in that house being treated like a stranger by the two people I loved most. I couldn't continue watching Sarah plan our divorce while pretending everything was normal. And I couldn't bear seeing Emma's relief every time I left for work, as if my absence made her day better. I wrote Sarah a letter explaining my decision to leave. I told her about finding the attorney's card about Jim's revelation that she had been discussing our problems with the neighbors about Emma's wish that I would disappear. I explained that I was giving them exactly what they wanted, but not permanently. I was going to become the man they needed me to be, and when I returned, I would prove that their faith in me wasn't misplaced. I placed my wedding ring on top of the letter and left both on the kitchen table where Sarah would find them when she came down for breakfast. Then I packed a single suitcase with enough clothes for a week, gathered my $800 in savings from our emergency fund, and called Harold to quit my job. "You're making a mistake, Thompson," Harold said when I told him I was leaving town. "That promotion was practically yours after the work you did on the factory case." "I'm making the first right decision I've made in years," I replied, hanging up before he could argue further. I bought a Greyhound bus ticket to Chicago, figuring a big city would offer more opportunities to reinvent myself. The bus departed at noon, which gave me time to stop by Emma's school and see her one last time before leaving. I sat in my car across from Lincoln Middle School during lunch period, watching my daughter eat a sandwich with her friends on the playground. She was laughing at something Jessica had said, her blonde hair catching the sunlight, looking happier than I had seen her in months. As I watched Emma enjoying herself without me around, I realized Jim had been right. Sarah wasn't the only one who thought I should go away. Emma was flourishing in my absence, free from the stress and disappointment I brought into her life. Maybe leaving really was the most loving thing I could do for my family. I drove home to collect my suitcase and found Emma standing at the top of the staircase wearing her school clothes and holding her backpack. She must have come home for lunch and seen my letter on the kitchen table. Her face was streaked with tears, but her expression wasn't sadness or fear. It was something much more devastating. Relief. My 12-year-old daughter was relieved to see me leaving. The realization hit me like a physical blow, but it also strengthened my resolve. Emma would be better off without the father who consistently let her down. She deserved someone reliable, someone who showed up, someone who made her feel proud instead of embarrassed. "I'm going to become the father you deserve," I told her from the bottom of the stairs. "When I come back, everything will be different." Emma didn't respond. She just watched me pick up my suitcase and walk toward the door. As I reached for the handle, I heard her voice behind me, so quiet I almost missed it. "Goodbye, Daddy." Those two words contained more finality than any divorce papers could. Emma wasn't saying goodbye for now. She was saying goodbye forever, accepting that the father she had hoped for was never coming back. She was letting go of her expectations and moving on with her life. I wanted to turn around and tell her I loved her, that I would miss her every day, that leaving was the hardest thing I had ever done. But I also knew that promises from me had become meaningless in her world. The only way to prove my love was through actions, and those actions required me to leave. The bus ride to Chicago took 6 hours, giving me plenty of time to think about the magnitude of what I was attempting. I was 28 years old with no college degree, no special skills, and less than $1,000 to my name. I was starting over in a city where I knew no one, with no clear plan beyond a determination to succeed. Other passengers on the bus chatted about their destinations and their reasons for traveling, but I sat in silence, staring out the window at the Iowa farmland rolling past. Each mile took me further from the life I had known and closer to an uncertain future. The weight of what I was giving up pressed down on me like a physical force. By the time we reached Chicago's downtown bus terminal, night had fallen and the city lights stretched out in every direction. I had never lived anywhere larger than Cedar Falls, and the sheer scale of Chicago felt overwhelming. Skyscrapers reached toward the clouds, traffic moved in rivers of headlights, and people hurried past each other on sidewalks with purpose I couldn't yet understand. I found a room at the YMCA on South Wabash, paying $45 for a week's stay in a space barely larger than Emma's bedroom back home. The room contained a narrow bed, a small dresser, and a window that looked out onto an alley where delivery trucks rumbled past at all hours. It wasn't much, but it was mine, and it represented the first step toward becoming someone Sarah and Emma could respect. That first night in Chicago, I lay awake, listening to the sounds of a city that never slept, wondering if I had made the biggest mistake of my life. I thought about Sarah finding my letter in the morning, about Emma coming home from school to discover I was gone, about the neighbors watching our family fall apart and feeling vindicated in their judgment of me. But I also thought about the alternative. I could have stayed in Cedar Falls, accepted the divorce, moved into a small apartment across town, and spent the rest of my life being the father Emma saw on weekends and holidays. I could have remained the man who had disappointed them forever, trying to make up for missing the school play and all the other moments I had prioritized incorrectly. Instead, I chose the harder path. I chose to disappear completely, to risk everything on the possibility that I could transform myself into someone worth coming back to. I chose to love my family enough to leave them gambling that the man I could become would be worth the pain of the man I was leaving behind. Sleep finally came sometime after 3 in the morning, and with it came dreams of Emma singing "Somewhere Over the Rainbow" to an empty auditorium, her voice echoing off vacant seats where her father should have been sitting. My first week in Chicago was a crash course in survival. I spent days walking the downtown streets, applying for any job that didn't require experience or references. The city was brutal in its indifference, full of people who moved past me as if I didn't exist. I was just another small-town refugee trying to make it in the big city, and the competition was fierce. After 5 days of rejections, I finally landed a position as a night security guard at a small tech startup called Data Flow Solutions. The company occupied 2 floors of a converted warehouse in the West Loop, and my job was to walk the building from 6 in the evening until 6 in the morning, making sure no one broke in or vandalized the equipment. The pay was minimal, barely enough to cover my room at the YMCA and basic meals, but it was honest work that gave me time to think and plan my next moves. More importantly, it introduced me to Marcus Rodriguez, the 24-year-old founder of Dataflow, who often worked late into the night. Marcus was everything I wasn't at that point in my life. He was confident, educated, and visionary with an MIT degree in computer science and a business plan that could change how companies analyze data. He was developing software that could help businesses predict trends, identify risks, and make smarter decisions based on massive amounts of information. During my rounds, I would find Marcus hunched over his computer, surrounded by empty coffee cups and pages of code printouts. At first, we just exchanged polite greetings, but gradually we began having longer conversations. Marcus was curious about my background, and when I mentioned my experience in insurance, his eyes lit up with interest. "Insurance is all about risk analysis," he said one night around 2 in the morning. "You guys have been doing data analytics longer than anyone, but you're still using Stone Age tools to process information. What if we could give insurance companies software that analyzed risk factors in real time using thousands of variables instead of the basic formulas they're using now, de force? Sub to force." I had never thought of insurance that way, but Marcus was right. Every claim I had investigated involved patterns and probabilities that could be quantified and analyzed. The factory fire that had cost me my family was exactly the kind of case where better data analysis might have prevented fraud from happening in the first place. "The problem isn't the technology," I told Marcus. "It's that insurance people don't understand technology, and technology people don't understand insurance. You need someone who speaks both languages." That conversation changed everything. Marcus began staying later, asking me detailed questions about how insurance companies operated, what kind of information they needed, and what problems they faced on a daily basis. I found myself becoming his unofficial consultant on the insurance industry, helping him understand the practical applications of his theoretical software. 3 months into my security job, Marcus made an offer that seemed too good to be true. He wanted me to become Dataflow's vice president of product development, responsible for adapting the company's data analytics platform for the insurance industry. In exchange for my expertise and sweat equity, he would give me a 10% stake in the company. "I can't pay you much of a salary right now," Marcus explained. "But if we succeed, that 10% could be worth millions. You'd essentially be betting on yourself and on our ability to build something revolutionary together." I thought about Sarah and Emma, about the modest house in Cedar Falls where I had felt like a failure, about the promotion I had pursued at the expense of my family's happiness. This was my chance to build something significant, to become the kind of man who could provide real security and stability for the people he loved. I accepted Marcus's offer and threw myself into the work with an intensity that surprised even me. I was learning a completely new industry while drawing on my insurance background to solve problems no one had tackled before. I worked 18-hour days studying programming languages at night and writing business proposals during my breaks. The first year was brutal. Dataflow was surviving on venture capital that was running out quickly, and we had no guarantee that any insurance companies would be interested in our software. I was living on ramen noodles and sleeping on a mattress on the floor of a studio apartment, but I felt more alive than I had in years. During this period, I began transforming myself in other ways too. I started working out at a community center gym, losing the extra weight I had carried since college. I bought better clothes at thrift stores, learning how to dress professionally on a minimal budget. I took night classes in business and computer science at a community college, using student loans to pay for courses that would make me more valuable to Dataflow. Most importantly, I was developing confidence in my own judgment and abilities. For years in Cedar Falls, I had felt like I was failing at everything that mattered. Now I was building something from scratch, solving complex problems, and seeing the results of my efforts in real time. The breakthrough came during our second year when I convinced Marcus to attend the National Insurance Conference in Las Vegas. We had developed a prototype of our risk analysis software, and I wanted to demonstrate it to industry professionals who could appreciate its potential. Our booth was tiny, tucked away in a corner between companies selling filing cabinets and coffee machines. But word spread quickly about the young guys from Chicago who had developed software that could predict insurance fraud with unprecedented accuracy. By the second day of the conference, we had lines of people waiting to see our demonstration. The moment that changed everything happened when Robert Chen, the Chief Technology Officer of Midwestern Mutual Insurance, stopped by our booth. Midwestern Mutual was one of the largest insurance companies in the country, and Robert had the authority to make decisions worth millions of dollars. "Show me what this software can do with real data," Robert said, handing me a USB drive containing information about 1,000 recent claims. I loaded the data into our system and ran the analysis. Within minutes, our software had identified 37 claims that showed patterns consistent with fraud, including one case involving a factory fire that bore striking similarities to the investigation that had started my journey. "This claim here," I said, pointing to the factory fire case. "Your adjusters probably spent weeks investigating this, interviewing witnesses, analyzing evidence. Our software flagged it immediately based on the timing of the fire, the owner's financial history, and 17 other risk factors that correlate with intentional arson." Robert studied the results for several minutes, then looked up at Marcus and me with an expression of genuine amazement. "How fast can you scale this up for a company with 50,000 claims per month?" That question led to a contract worth $50 million paid out over 3 years as we customized and implemented our software across Midwestern Mutual's entire operation. My 10% stake in Dataflow, which had seemed like a fantasy when Marcus first offered it, suddenly represented $5 million in real value. But more than the money, the Midwestern Mutual deal proved that I had been right to leave Cedar Falls. I had transformed myself from a small-town insurance adjuster who couldn't get promoted into a business executive who was revolutionizing an entire industry. I was becoming the kind of man who could provide for his family, who could be counted on, who wouldn't have to choose between work and family because he would be successful enough to control his own schedule. For the first time since leaving Iowa, I allowed myself to think about Sarah and Emma. They would be amazed by what I had accomplished, proud of the man I had become. But I also knew I wasn't ready to return yet. The success with Midwestern Mutual was just the beginning. I wanted to build something so substantial that Sarah and Emma would never have to worry about financial security again. I hired a private investigator to check on my family, not to contact them, but simply to know they were safe and healthy. The report I received was both reassuring and heartbreaking. Emma was thriving in high school, earning excellent grades and participating in drama club. Sarah had been promoted to head librarian and seemed to be managing well as a single mother. But they were also struggling financially. Sarah's salary was modest, and without my income, they were having trouble maintaining the house on Maple Street. Emma was talking about skipping college because they couldn't afford tuition, even at state schools. I wanted to send them money anonymously to ensure Emma could pursue her education without financial stress. But I stopped myself. If I helped them financially before they invited me back into their lives, it would look like I was trying to buy their forgiveness. I needed them to want Cole Thompson the person, not Cole Thompson the provider. So I focused on building Dataflow into something even bigger. We acquired 2 smaller companies, expanded our software to serve healthcare and financial services industries, and began planning for an initial public offering. My personal net worth grew from thousands to millions, but I lived modestly, putting most of my earnings back into the company. The irony wasn't lost on me. I had more money than I had ever imagined possible, but I was still essentially alone. I dated successful women who were impressed by my business achievements, but I never formed deep relationships. Part of my heart remained in Cedar Falls with the family I had left behind. On Emma's 18th birthday, I was in New York, closing a $100 million acquisition deal. While I sat in a conference room negotiating contract terms, my daughter was celebrating becoming an adult without any acknowledgement from her father. The success that was supposed to make me worthy of her love had kept me away from another milestone in her life. That night in my hotel room overlooking Manhattan, I realized that all the money and business success in the world meant nothing if I had no one to share it with. I had become financially successful beyond my wildest dreams, but I was still failing as a father and husband. Emma was growing up without me, and Sarah was building a life that didn't include me. I needed to find a way back into their lives, but I couldn't just show up and expect them to welcome me home. Too much time had passed. Too much pain had been caused by my absence. They would need to choose to invite me back, and I would need to prove that the man who returned was worthy of the love I had lost. Dataflow's success opened doors I had never imagined possible. We went public 3 years after the Midwestern Mutual deal, and the company's valuation soared to $800 million. My 10% stake made me wealthy beyond anything I had dreamed during those nights in Cedar Falls when I worried about paying the mortgage. But success in business was only part of my transformation. I was methodically rebuilding every aspect of myself, becoming the kind of man Sarah and Emma would be proud to know. I hired a personal trainer and transformed my physique, replacing the soft body of a desk worker with the lean frame of someone who took care of himself. I learned to speak fluent Spanish and French, taking intensive courses that broadened my perspective beyond the small-town mindset I had carried from Iowa. I took flying lessons and earned my pilot's license, purchasing a small jet that allowed me to travel efficiently between Dataflow offices in Chicago, New York, and Los Angeles. I studied art and wine, attended symphony performances and gallery openings, developing the sophistication that comes from exposure to culture and learning. Everything I was becoming stood in stark contrast to the man who had disappointed his family. Where Cole Thompson, the insurance adjuster, had been reactive and limited in his thinking, Cole Thompson, the business executive, was proactive and strategic. Where the old Cole had been forced to choose between work and family due to financial pressures, the new Cole had the resources to prioritize whatever mattered most. Dataflow continued expanding aggressively. We developed artificial intelligence systems that could predict market trends, identify cybersecurity threats, and optimize supply chain management for major corporations. Companies like Ford, Boeing, and J.P. Morgan became our clients, paying millions of dollars annually for access to our analytics platforms. My role evolved from product developer to company visionary. I gave keynote speeches at industry conferences, was featured on the covers of business magazines, and consulted with Fortune 500 companies on their digital transformation strategies. The Wall Street Journal published a profile calling me the insurance adjuster who revolutionized big data analytics. Yet despite all this external success, I remained haunted by the family I had left behind. Every achievement felt hollow without Sarah and Emma there to share it. I would stand on the balcony of my penthouse apartment, looking out over the Chicago skyline, wondering what my daughter was doing at that exact moment, whether she ever thought about her father, who had disappeared from her life. Through my private investigator, I learned that Emma had graduated valedictorian from Cedar Falls High School and received a full scholarship to Northwestern University for journalism. The pride I felt was mixed with regret that I hadn't been there to see her walk across the stage or to celebrate her incredible achievement. My daughter was becoming an exceptional young woman, and I was missing all of it. Sarah had remarried a man named David Williams, a high school English teacher who was kind but financially struggling. They were still living in the same house on Maple Street, which needed significant repairs they couldn't afford. David's salary combined with Sarah's librarian wages barely covered their basic expenses, leaving no room for luxuries or improvements. I wrestled with the temptation to help them anonymously. It would have been simple to arrange for the house to be repaired, for Emma's remaining college expenses to be covered, for Sarah to receive an anonymous donation that would ease their financial stress. But I knew such help would be meaningless if it came from someone they considered a stranger. The hardest part was learning that Emma had grown up believing I had abandoned them for selfish reasons. Sarah had apparently told her that I had left because family responsibilities were too much trouble, that I had chosen freedom over commitment. Emma didn't know about my letter explaining my intentions, didn't understand that leaving had been the most difficult decision of my life. In Emma's mind, her father was a man who had walked away when things got difficult and never looked back. She had no idea that I thought about them every day, that every business success was motivated by a desire to prove myself worthy of their love, that I would have traded all my wealth for the chance to be her father again. This misunderstanding became clear when I read an essay Emma had written for her college journalism class, which my investigator had obtained through careful research. The essay was titled, "The Father Who Left," and it described how my absence had taught her to be self-reliant, but had also left her with trust issues that affected her relationships. "My father taught me that people leave when you need them most," Emma had written. "He showed me that promises are just words that people use until something better comes along. I learned not to depend on anyone, because even the people who say they love you will choose themselves over you when it matters." Reading those words broke my heart in ways that business failures never could. My daughter had learned the wrong lessons from my leaving. Instead of seeing my departure as a sacrifice made out of love, she interpreted it as abandonment driven by selfishness. The distance between us wasn't just physical or temporal, it was philosophical and emotional. I realized that returning to Cedar Falls wouldn't be as simple as showing up successful and expecting forgiveness. Emma had built her identity around the belief that her father was unreliable and selfish. Changing that belief would require more than demonstrating financial success. It would require proving that my character had fundamentally changed, that the man who returned was worthy of trust in ways the man who left had never been. This understanding led me to make different choices about how I approach business and relationships. Instead of ruthlessly pursuing profit, I began focusing on how data flow could benefit society. We developed free versions of our software for nonprofit organizations and schools, giving them access to analytics tools that could help them operate more efficiently. I also began mentoring young entrepreneurs, particularly those from small towns who felt trapped by limited opportunities. I established a foundation that provided scholarships for students from rural areas who wanted to study technology or business, ensuring that other people wouldn't have to choose between family and success the way I had. These activities weren't just about building a better public image. They were about becoming the kind of man Emma could be proud to call her father, someone whose success was measured not just in dollars but in positive impact on other people's lives. I wanted to be worthy of the second chance I hoped to receive. As Emma progressed through college, I followed her achievements from a distance. She became editor of the Northwestern Journalism Review, won awards for investigative reporting, and earned internships at prestigious newspapers. Everything she accomplished reinforced my belief that she was extraordinary, but it also reminded me of how much of her growth I had missed. Then came the news that changed everything. Emma had gotten engaged to Tyler Morrison, a recent law school graduate who was drowning in student debt but seemed genuinely devoted to her. They were planning a small wedding in Cedar Falls, limited by a budget that couldn't accommodate many of the things Emma had dreamed about since she was little. My investigator informed me that Emma had struggled with whether to invite me to her wedding. She had asked Sarah's advice, expressing conflicted feelings about wanting her father there, but fearing that my presence would create drama on what should be the happiest day of her life. "I don't even know if he's alive," Emma had told Sarah during one of their conversations. "Maybe he has a new family somewhere and wouldn't even care about my wedding. But part of me still hopes he'll show up and prove that he actually loved me after all." Those words gave me the first real hope I had felt in 15 years. Emma still wanted her father in her life, despite everything that had happened. She had fantasized about me returning for her wedding, about having a father who would walk her down the aisle and celebrate her happiness. But hope was tempered by the weight of responsibility. If Emma did invite me to her wedding, I would have one chance to prove that leaving had been worth the pain it had caused. I would need to show her that the father who returned was someone she could trust, someone who would prioritize her happiness above his own concerns, someone who deserved a place in her future. The invitation, when it finally arrived at my corporate office, was both thrilling and terrifying. Emma had tracked down my business address through online research, and the envelope was addressed formally to Mr. Cole Thompson. Inside was an elegant but simple wedding invitation, clearly designed within a modest budget, asking me to attend Emma Thompson's marriage to Tyler Morrison. There was no personal note, no expression of emotion or explanation, just a formal invitation that represented either an olive branch or a final test. Emma was giving me the opportunity to prove myself, but she was also setting the stage for potential disappointment if I failed to meet her expectations. I spent weeks deciding how to respond, how to approach this reunion, how to demonstrate that 15 years of absence had been worthwhile. The last thing I wanted was to overshadow Emma's special day with drama about my transformation or expectations for our relationship. Finally, I decided to attend the wedding quietly, to let Emma and Tyler enjoy their celebration, and to prove through my behavior that I was no longer the man who had missed her school play. I would show up consistently, supportively, and without demanding immediate forgiveness or recognition. But 2 days before I was scheduled to leave for Iowa, I received devastating news that would test everything I had learned about priorities and family loyalty. My private investigator called with urgent news that made my blood run cold. Emma's wedding venue had experienced a catastrophic plumbing failure just 48 hours before the ceremony. The basement reception hall where they planned to hold the celebration had flooded with sewage, making the space completely unusable. Emma and Tyler had no backup plan, and no money to secure an alternative location on such short notice. The wedding might have to be canceled, the investigator told me over the phone. I heard Emma crying on the phone with the venue owner, begging for any solution. They've already sent out invitations, ordered flowers, and confirmed all the other details. Canceling now would be devastating financially and emotionally. This was exactly the kind of crisis where I could prove my value as a father, but it was also a trap. If I swooped in and saved Emma's wedding with my wealth, it might look like I was trying to buy my way back into her life. But if I did nothing and let her wedding be ruined, I would be repeating the same pattern that had driven our family apart 15 years earlier. I made the decision quickly. Emma's happiness was more important than my concerns about appearing manipulative. She deserved the wedding she had dreamed of, regardless of how my help might be perceived. I called the best wedding planner in Des Moines and arranged an emergency meeting. Within 6 hours, I had secured the ballroom at the Savory Hotel in downtown Des Moines, one of Iowa's most elegant venues. The wedding planner worked through the night to recreate all of Emma's planned details in the new location, upgrading everything significantly while maintaining the style Emma had chosen. I paid for premium flowers, gourmet catering, professional photography, and live music that transformed Emma's modest wedding into something worthy of a magazine spread. The total cost was more than most people's annual salary, but it represented a fraction of what I spent on business entertainment each year. The cover story was simple. The wedding planner contacted Emma and explained that a generous, anonymous benefactor had heard about her situation and wanted to sponsor her wedding as a gift to the community. Emma and Tyler were told only that someone believed love deserved to be celebrated properly and had chosen to help them without seeking recognition or gratitude. When Emma called Sarah to share the miraculous news, their conversation was filled with joy and disbelief. "I can't believe someone would do this for strangers," Emma said. "Whoever this person is, they've made my dreams come true. I just wish I knew who to thank." I flew to Iowa the day before the wedding, landing at a small airport outside Des Moines and driving a rented sedan to Cedar Falls. I wanted to approach this reunion with humility, not arriving in a private jet or luxury car that would emphasize the distance between my current life and the family I had left behind. The drive through Iowa farmland brought back memories of the life I had abandoned. The landscape looked exactly the same, rolling green fields stretching to the horizon. Farmhouses with red barns and grain silos, small towns connected by 2-lane highways. But I was returning as a completely different person than the man who had left on that Greyhound bus 15 years earlier. I checked into a modest hotel in Cedar Falls, choosing a simple room rather than the luxury suite I usually preferred. That evening, I drove past the house on Maple Street where Sarah and Emma still lived. The sight of my former home hit me with unexpected emotion. The paint was fading, and the roof still needed repair, but the garden was beautiful and well-maintained. Through the windows, I could see warm light and movement that suggested a happy household. Sarah appeared briefly in the front yard, watering flowers in the evening light. 15 years had changed her, adding lines around her eyes and silver to her brown hair, but she was still the woman I had fallen in love with in college. Watching her from the car, I felt a rush of regret for all the years we had lost, all the conversations we hadn't shared, all the moments of ordinary happiness I had sacrificed in pursuit of proving myself worthy. The night before Emma's wedding, I attended her rehearsal dinner at a local restaurant, positioning myself in the parking lot, where I could watch through the windows without being seen. Emma was radiant, laughing with her bridesmaids and glowing with happiness as Tyler held her hand. She had grown into a confident, beautiful woman who commanded attention and respect from everyone around her. Watching my daughter celebrate with her friends and future in-laws, I was struck by how complete her life appeared. Without me. She had succeeded academically, found love, built friendships, and developed into an accomplished adult. My absence hadn't prevented her from thriving. It had perhaps motivated her to become even stronger and more independent. This observation was both comforting and painful. I was proud that Emma had become such an exceptional person, but I was also aware that she had done so by learning not to depend on me. Rebuilding a relationship with her would require proving that I could add value to a life that was already fulfilling, that I deserved to be included in her success, rather than being seen as a threat to her stability. As I prepared to leave the restaurant parking lot, Sarah emerged from the building alone, talking on her cell phone. She walked to a quiet corner near my car, close enough that I could hear her conversation. She was talking to her sister Linda, and her words stopped me cold. "I know the wedding is beautiful, and I'm grateful for whoever made this possible," Sarah was saying, her voice thick with emotion. "But I can't help feeling sad that Cole isn't here to see Emma get married. Whatever problems we had, he loved her so much. I keep wondering what happened to him, whether he's even alive, whether he ever thinks about us." Sarah paused, listening to her sister's response, then continued. "I was so angry when he left, but I've realized over the years that I pushed him away. The silent treatment was cruel, and I never gave him a real chance to make things right. Maybe if I had been more forgiving, more willing to communicate, he wouldn't have felt like leaving was his only option." She wiped tears from her eyes before speaking again. "Emma asks about him sometimes, especially lately with the wedding planning. She wonders if he knows she's getting married, if he would be proud of the woman she's become. Part of me hopes he'll somehow find out and show up tomorrow, but I also know that's probably just a fantasy." Hearing Sarah's regret and longing made my heart ache with possibilities. She wasn't just sad about my absence, she was taking responsibility for her role in driving me away. After 15 years, she had gained perspective on our marriage problems and recognized that both of us had made mistakes. This gave me hope that forgiveness might be possible if I approached the situation with equal humility and accountability. But Sarah's words also increased the pressure I felt about appearing at Emma's wedding. This was my chance to step back into their lives, to prove that the father and husband they remembered could become the man they needed. If I failed to meet their expectations, if I disappointed them again, there might not be another opportunity. I spent that night in my hotel room rehearsing what I would say to Emma and Sarah, practicing how to be humble without being self-pitying, confident without being arrogant. I wanted to acknowledge the pain my leaving had caused, while also explaining how that pain had motivated me to become someone worthy of their love. The next morning, I prepared for Emma's wedding with the care of someone getting ready for the most important presentation of his life. I dressed in a perfectly tailored navy suit, expensive but not ostentatious, that would fit appropriately in any setting from the Iowa farmland to Manhattan boardrooms. I carried a gift for Emma and Tyler, a crystal vase that cost more than I used to make in a month, but which appeared elegant rather than extravagant. As I drove toward the Savory Hotel in Des Moines, I thought about the journey that had brought me back to this moment. 15 years earlier, I had left Cedar Falls as a failure who couldn't balance work and family responsibilities. I was returning as a successful businessman who had learned to prioritize relationships over profit, who had the resources to support his family without sacrificing time with them. But success and wealth were only meaningful if Emma and Sarah were willing to let me share those gifts with them. I was about to discover whether the man I had become was someone they could love, trust, and welcome back into their lives. The wedding would be my test, my chance to prove that leaving had been worth the pain it had caused. Everything I had built over 15 years of exile came down to this single day, and how I chose to handle the reunion with the family I had never stopped loving. Arriving at the Savory Hotel in Des Moines, I was amazed by the transformation the wedding planner had achieved in less than 48 hours. The ballroom was stunning, decorated with white roses and elegant lighting that created an atmosphere of sophisticated romance. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over tables set with fine china and silver, while a string quartet tuned their instruments near a dance floor that gleamed with polish. Emma and Tyler had planned a modest reception for 60 guests in a basement venue with folding chairs and basic catering. Instead, they were getting a celebration worthy of royalty, with gourmet cuisine, premium liquor, and professional service that would make their wedding memorable for everyone in attendance. I positioned myself in the hotel lobby, watching as guests arrived and marveled at the unexpected luxury. Emma's friends from Northwestern looked impressed by the elegant surroundings, while Tyler's law school classmates seemed amazed that their financially struggling friend was celebrating in such style. When Emma arrived for pre-wedding photographs, my breath caught in my throat. She was radiant in a white silk gown that had clearly been her original choice, but which looked even more beautiful against the backdrop of the upgraded venue. Her blonde hair was styled in an elegant updo, and she carried a bouquet of white roses that complemented the room's decorations perfectly. Sarah followed closely behind, wearing a navy blue dress that was simple but flattering. She moved with the confidence of a woman who had learned to manage life independently, but I could see traces of stress around her eyes that suggested she was still processing the miraculous rescue of Emma's wedding. Tyler looked handsome in his rented tuxedo, his face glowing with happiness and relief. His parents, who had flown in from Oregon, appeared overwhelmed by the opulence surrounding their son's wedding. I had learned from my investigator that Tyler's family was working class, and this level of luxury was probably foreign to their experience. As the ceremony began, I found a seat in the back of the ballroom where I could observe without drawing attention. The officiant was Pastor Johnson from the Methodist Church, where Emma had been baptized, a man who had known our family during the happy years before everything fell apart. Walking down the aisle, Emma looked confident and radiant, but I noticed her glance toward the empty seat in the front row where her father should have been sitting. Sarah had saved the space out of hope or habit, and its emptiness was a visible reminder of my absence from this crucial moment. The ceremony was beautiful and personal, filled with references to Emma and Tyler's shared dreams and commitment to building a life together. When Pastor Johnson asked who was giving Emma away, Sarah stood and said, "Her family and I do," acknowledging both my absence and the community that had supported Emma throughout her childhood. During the reception, I watched Emma and Tyler move through the crowd, greeting guests and expressing amazement at the unexpected luxury of their celebration. Emma repeatedly asked about the anonymous benefactor who had made this possible, clearly wanting to thank the person who had saved her wedding. "I keep thinking it might be someone from the journalism program," she told Tyler during a quiet moment I overheard from across the room. "Maybe a wealthy alumnus who believes in supporting young people's dreams. I just wish I knew who to thank." Sarah spent the evening ensuring that everything ran smoothly, coordinating with the hotel staff and making sure elderly relatives had everything they needed. She looked more relaxed than I had seen her in the pre-wedding photographs, clearly relieved that Emma's special day was exceeding all expectations. As the evening progressed, I found myself studying the details of Emma's personality and relationships. She was clearly beloved by her friends, who spoke about her loyalty, intelligence, and sense of humor. Tyler's family had obviously embraced her completely, with his mother treating Emma like the daughter she had always wanted. But I also noticed moments when Emma seemed reflective, particularly during the father-daughter dance when Tyler's father stepped in to honor their family tradition. Emma handled the moment gracefully, but I could see emotion in her eyes as she danced with Tyler's father instead of her own. The speeches during dinner were touching and personal. Tyler's best man talked about how Emma had brought out the best in his friend, making him more ambitious and confident. Emma's maid of honor, her college roommate Jessica, spoke about Emma's strength and independence, mentioning how she had learned early in life not to depend on people who might let her down. That reference to my abandonment, delivered without malice but with painful accuracy, reminded me why I needed to approach this reunion carefully. Emma had built her identity around being self-sufficient, precisely because her father had proven unreliable. Earning her trust would require demonstrating consistency over time, not just making a dramatic gesture at her wedding. As the evening wound down, guests began leaving with enthusiastic praise for the beautiful celebration. Emma and Tyler stood near the exit, thanking everyone for attending and expressing continued amazement at the mysterious generosity that had made their dream wedding possible. I waited until most of the guests had departed before approaching the receiving line. My heart pounded as I got closer to Emma and Sarah, knowing that the next few minutes would determine the course of our relationship for years to come. When I was 3 people away from Emma, Sarah noticed me first. She was looking past her daughter toward the remaining guests when her eyes landed on my face. For a moment, she didn't react, as if her brain couldn't process what she was seeing. Then her mouth opened slightly and all color drained from her face. "Cole," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the background music. Emma turned to see what had shocked her mother, and our eyes met for the first time in 15 years. My daughter, now a grown woman on her wedding day, stared at me with an expression that cycled through confusion, recognition, and disbelief. The man she was looking at bore little resemblance to the father she remembered. Where Cole Thompson, the insurance adjuster, had been soft and uncertain, Cole Thompson, the business executive, was fit and confident. Where the old Cole had dressed in discount clothing that never quite fit properly, the new Cole wore a perfectly tailored suit that conveyed success and sophistication. But more than the physical changes, Emma seemed struck by the presence I projected. This wasn't the man who had left their lives as a failure. This was someone who commanded attention and respect, someone who belonged in elegant surroundings, someone who clearly had options and had chosen to be there. "Daddy," Emma said, her voice breaking on the word. The sound of my daughter calling me Daddy, after 15 years of silence, hit me like a physical blow. All the business success, all the wealth, all the transformation I had undergone suddenly seemed insignificant compared to hearing that word from Emma's lips. "Hello, sweetheart." I managed to say, my own voice thick with emotion. "You look absolutely beautiful." Emma's eyes filled with tears as she struggled to process my presence at her wedding. Around us, the remaining guests began to notice the drama unfolding, but I was focused entirely on my daughter's face, watching her try to reconcile the father she remembered with the man standing before her. Tyler moved closer to Emma, unsure what was happening, but clearly recognizing the emotional intensity of the moment. Sarah stood frozen, her hand pressed to her mouth, staring at me as if I were a ghost that had materialized from her memories. The next few moments would determine whether my 15-year journey had been worthwhile, whether the man I had become was someone Emma and Sarah could welcome back into their lives, whether the love that had motivated my transformation was strong enough to bridge the years of pain and separation. Everything I had built, everything I had learned, everything I had become came down to this single moment in a hotel ballroom in Des Moines, Iowa, with my daughter in her wedding dress and my ex-wife looking at me as if she were seeing a stranger who wore a familiar face. The silence in the ballroom seemed to stretch forever as Emma and Sarah processed my presence. Tyler looked between his new wife and the man who was clearly her father, trying to understand the significance of this moment. The few remaining guests sensed drama and moved closer, curious about the emotional scene unfolding near the exit. "How are you here?" Emma finally asked, her voice a mixture of wonder and confusion. "Where have you been? You look so different." Before I could answer, Sarah found her voice. "Cole, what happened to you? We thought maybe you were dead or living in poverty somewhere or had started a new family. We never imagined you would look like this." The questions came from a place of genuine confusion. The man they remembered had left Cedar Falls as a financial failure who couldn't handle family responsibilities. The man standing before them clearly belonged in upscale settings, moved with confidence, and wore clothes that cost more than they used to spend on groceries in a month. "I became the man you needed me to be," I said simply. "It just took me 15 years to get there." Emma's eyes narrowed as she studied my face, looking for traces of the father she remembered. "You're different. Everything about you is different. The way you stand, the way you dress, even the way you talk. What happened after you left us?" Taking a deep breath, I made a decision that would either bridge the gap between us or widen it permanently. "Emma, I need to tell you something about your wedding. The anonymous benefactor who paid for all this, who saved your celebration when the venue flooded, who made sure you could have the wedding you dreamed of. That was me. The revelation hit Emma like a physical blow. Her hand flew to her mouth, and she stared at me with a mixture of shock, gratitude, and anger. You paid for my wedding. You've been watching us. How long have you known about Tyler and me getting married? I received your invitation at my office in Chicago, I explained. When I learned about the venue crisis, I couldn't let your wedding be ruined. You deserve to have your dreams come true, regardless of how you felt about me. Sarah stepped closer, her voice sharp with emotion. Your office in Chicago, what kind of office? What do you do now? This was the moment I had been preparing for the chance to reveal how completely I had transformed my life. I'm the co-founder and chief technology officer of Dataflow Solutions. We develop analytics software for Fortune 500 companies. The company went public 3 years ago. Tyler, who had been silent until this point, suddenly looked at me with recognition. Dataflow Solutions. You're Cole Thompson from Dataflow. I read about you in law school. Your company revolutionized risk analysis for insurance companies. You're worth like $50 million. The number hung in the air like a revelation that changed everything. Emma stared at me with an expression of complete disbelief, trying to reconcile the successful businessman Tyler was describing with the father who had left them struggling financially 15 years earlier. 50 million, Emma whispered. But we've been living paycheck to paycheck this whole time. Mom worked extra shifts at the library to help me pay for college. Tyler and I were worried about how we'd afford this wedding even before the venue flooded. If you had that kind of money, why didn't you help us? The pain in her voice cut through me like a knife. This was the question I had dreaded, the accusation I couldn't fully defend. Because I needed you to invite me back into your lives, not feel obligated to accept me because of money. I wanted you to want Cole Thompson the person, not Cole Thompson the provider. Sarah's eyes flashed with anger. So you let us struggle while you lived in luxury. You let Emma worry about college debt while you were flying around in private jets. How is that love? Cole, how is that being the father she needed? The criticism was fair and devastating. In trying to prove myself worthy through success, I had allowed the people I loved to face financial hardships I could have easily prevented. My pride had caused them stress and limited their opportunities, exactly the opposite of what a loving father would do. You're right, I admitted, my voice breaking. I made the wrong choice. I was so focused on becoming someone you could respect that I forgot the most important part of being a father is being there when your family needs help. I'm sorry, Emma. I'm so sorry for all of it. Emma studied my face for a long moment, tears streaming down her cheeks. The wedding makeup that had looked perfect an hour earlier was now smudged with emotion. But she had never looked more beautiful to me than she did in that moment of raw honesty. I spent 15 years hating you, she said quietly. I told myself that you abandoned us because you didn't love us enough to stay. I built my whole identity around being strong enough not to need my father. And now you're telling me that you left because you loved us too much to stay as the man you were. Yes, I said simply. I left because I was failing you every day, and I thought the kindest thing I could do was become someone worthy of being your father. I know it was the wrong choice, but it was the only choice I knew how to make at the time. Tyler cleared his throat, drawing our attention. Maybe we should continue this conversation somewhere more private. People are starting to stare. He was right. The few remaining guests and hotel staff were watching our family drama with undisguised fascination. This intimate conversation deserved privacy away from the public spectacle we were creating. There's a quiet lounge upstairs, I suggested. We could talk there without an audience. As we moved toward the elevator, Emma walked beside me, studying my profile. You really paid for all this. The flowers, the catering, the ballroom, everything. Everything, I confirmed. I wanted your wedding to be perfect, even if I wasn't sure I'd be welcome to attend it. In the private lounge with Tyler, Emma, and Sarah seated across from me, I told them the complete story of my 15 years away. I described the night security job that led me to Dataflow, the development of insurance analytics software, the company's growth from a startup to a publicly traded corporation. I explained how every business decision had been motivated by a desire to prove myself worthy of their love. I dated other women. I admitted wanting to be completely honest. But I never remarried, never had other children. Part of my heart remained in Cedar Falls with the family I had left behind. Every success felt empty without you there to share it. Sarah listened to my story with an expression that shifted between amazement and sorrow. When I finished, she said, "I owe you an apology, Cole. The silent treatment we gave you after Emma's school play was cruel and immature. I was angry about the play, but I was also frustrated by years of feeling like work always came first. Instead of talking about our problems, I punished you until you felt like leaving was your only option." Emma looked surprised by her mother's admission. "Mom, you never told me that. You always said Dad left because he didn't want the responsibility of a family." "I was hurt and angry," Sarah explained. "It was easier to paint your father as selfish than to admit that I had pushed him away. We both made mistakes, Emma. Your father chose work over your school play, but I chose punishment over communication." This acknowledgement of shared responsibility created an opening for healing that I hadn't dared to hope for. Both Sarah and I were taking ownership of our failures, creating space for forgiveness and growth. Tyler, who had been listening quietly, suddenly spoke up. "This might not be my place to say, but Emma has spent our entire relationship talking about wanting her father back in her life. She's dreamed about you showing up for important moments, about having a dad who would be proud of her accomplishments. Now you're here, you've proven that you can be successful and reliable, and you made her wedding dreams come true. Maybe it's time to stop focusing on past mistakes and start building something new." Emma looked at Tyler with gratitude, then back at me with an expression that seemed to be weighing 15 years of pain against the possibility of reconciliation. "I don't know how to trust you," she said honestly. "You left once when things got hard. How do I know you won't leave again if family life becomes complicated?" It was a fair question that deserved a complete answer. "Because I've learned that success without family is meaningless," I said. "Because I've spent 15 years regretting the choice to prioritize work over your school play. Because I'm financially secure enough now that I'll never have to choose between providing for my family and being present for my family." I paused, looking directly into Emma's eyes. "And because losing you once taught me that no amount of money or business success can replace the love of your daughter. I won't make that mistake again." Emma was quiet for several minutes, processing everything she had learned. Finally, she said, "I can't just flip a switch and trust you completely. Too much has happened and too much time has passed, but I'm willing to try to rebuild our relationship if you're willing to be patient while I learn how to have a father again." The relief I felt was overwhelming. Emma wasn't offering immediate forgiveness or instant reconciliation, but she was offering something more valuable, the opportunity to prove myself through consistent actions over time. She was giving me the chance to be her father again, to earn her trust through reliability rather than grand gestures. "I have a proposition," I said, pulling out my phone. "Tyler, you're drowning in law school debt, right? What if I paid that off as my wedding gift to you both? Not as a way to buy your affection, but as a way to give you the financial freedom to build the life you want together." Tyler's eyes widened. "That's over $200,000. I can't accept that from someone I just met." "You're not accepting it from someone you just met," I corrected. "You're accepting it from your wife's father, who has 15 years of missed birthdays and Christmas presents to make up for." Emma reached for Tyler's hand, her eyes bright with tears. "It would change everything for us. We could buy a house, start a family without worrying about debt payments." "There's one condition," I continued. "I want to be part of your lives going forward, not trying to make up for lost time all at once, but building a relationship gradually. I'm opening a data flow office in Des Moines so I can be close enough to see you regularly. I want to earn the right to be called Grandpa someday." Sarah smiled through her tears. "You want to move back to Iowa after living in Chicago and traveling the world. I've learned that home isn't about the sophistication of your surroundings," I said. "It's about being near the people you love." Chicago was just a place where I went to become someone worthy of coming home to Iowa. Emma stood up and walked over to my chair. For a moment, I thought she might hug me, but instead she extended her hand in a formal handshake. "Hello, Dad," she said with a small smile. "I'm Emma Thompson Morrison, and I'm very nice to meet you." I shook her hand, understanding the significance of her gesture. She was acknowledging our relationship while also establishing that we were essentially strangers who needed to get to know each other again. It was a mature and realistic approach to rebuilding our bond. "Hello, Emma," I replied. "I'm Cole Thompson, and I'm incredibly proud to be your father. Congratulations on marrying such a wonderful man on your journalism career and on becoming the amazing woman you are today." As we prepared to leave the hotel, Emma asked one final question. "Dad, why didn't you ever try to contact us during all those years, even just to let us know you were alive and successful?" I thought about my answer carefully. Because I was afraid that if I reached out before I had truly changed, I would disappoint you again. I needed to be absolutely certain that the man who came back was someone you could count on forever. It took me 15 years to become that man. Emma nodded, seeming to understand. "Well, you're here now. And you saved my wedding. And you're offering to change Tyler's life by paying off his debt. Those are pretty good ways to prove that you've changed." 6 months later, I kept my promise to open a data flow office in Des Moines. Emma and Tyler bought a house 20 minutes from Sarah's place in Cedar Falls, and I rented a condo nearby. We started having family dinners every Sunday, slowly rebuilding the relationships that had been severed 15 years earlier. Emma and I met for coffee every Wednesday morning, talking about her work as an investigative journalist and my experiences building a technology company. She interviewed me for a feature story about second chances and family reconciliation, which won a regional journalism award. Sarah and I developed a friendship based on mutual respect and shared love for Emma. We never attempted to rekindle our romance, but we learned to co-parent our adult daughter and eventually became close friends who could laugh about the past while building new traditions for the future. When Emma announced she was pregnant with her first child, she asked me to be in the delivery room alongside Tyler. Holding my granddaughter for the first time, I realized that all the wealth and business success in the world couldn't compare to the simple joy of being called Grandpa by a child who would grow up knowing her grandfather loved her. The lesson I learned from losing and regaining my family is simple but profound. True success isn't about proving others wrong about you. It's about becoming worthy of the love you want to receive. Sometimes leaving is the only way to find out who you really are, but coming back requires the courage to accept that others have grown and changed too. Love isn't about grand gestures or dramatic transformations. It's about showing up consistently, prioritizing relationships over achievements, and understanding that being needed is more important than being impressive. The father who left Cedar Falls was trying to prove he was worthy of love. The father who returned had learned that love is something you demonstrate through daily choices, not something you earn through extraordinary accomplishments. If you've ever felt like you weren't good enough for the people you love, remember that transformation is possible at any age. But also remember that the people who truly love you are usually more interested in your presence than your success. Don't wait until you've achieved everything to come home to the relationships that matter most. I'd love to hear your thoughts about second chances and family reconciliation. Have you ever had to choose between personal growth and staying close to loved ones? How do you balance ambition with family relationships? Please share your experiences in the comments below, and if this story resonated with you, please like this video. Subscribe for more stories about redemption and personal growth, and share it with someone who might need to hear that it's never too late to come home. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and I hope you find the courage to prioritize love over everything else that seems important in the moment.